My name is Garrett Sable, and for 16 years, the only way in or out of my 12-acre estate in East Texas was a half-mile ribbon of road my father built with his own hands in 1987. He was a road contractor who spent 26 years building bridges for the state. When he bought this parcel of pine and pasture, the first thing he did was grade and pave his own private access lane straight from the county highway to the back of the property where he raised our family home. He paid for every load of gravel, every coat of chip seal, and every drainage pipe himself. He even filed the road with the county as Sable Lane, a private thoroughfare tied directly to our deed. For decades, nobody cared. The land around us was still cattle country. Then, in the early 2000s, a developer bought the acreage next door and threw up Ridgewood Estates, 112 cookie-cutter homes, a clubhouse, a pool, and a brand new homeowners association that believed it ruled the entire countryside. Their original plans called for their own dedicated entrance road on the east side. Instead, the developer quietly routed every resident through my father's existing road because it saved him $300,000 in grading and drainage. Dad noticed. He confronted the developer, who promised to build the proper entrance within 2 years. My father, trusting as always, shook hands and let the new neighbors use Sable Lane while they waited. 2 years turned into 5. 5 turned into 10. The developer sold his last lots, dissolved his company, and vanished to Florida. The residents of Ridgewood kept driving on my father's road every single day as if it had always belonged to them. My father passed in 2019. I inherited the house, the land, and the road. I moved back with my 14-year-old son, Colton. I'm a licensed civil engineer who spent 15 years designing drainage systems and road infrastructure for the county. I know property lines, easements, right-of-way law, and construction codes the way most people know their own phone number. For the first 2 years after I moved home, I left things alone. The neighbors waved when they passed, a few even brought casseroles. The arrangement seemed harmless enough, and I knew my father would have wanted it that way. Then, Darlene Voss got elected HOA president, and everything changed. Darlene was the kind of woman who had peaked at a PTA meeting and spent the rest of her life chasing that same rush of tiny authority. She ran the neighborhood like a personal dictatorship, finding people for mailbox colors, measuring grass blades with a ruler, and sending certified letters about holiday wreath sizes. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday, printed on official Ridgewood Estates letterhead and signed by her. It informed me that Sable Lane had been declared a community maintenance concern. I was ordered to repave the entire surface, install reflective lane markers, and bring the road up to HOA standards within 60 days. The letter included a copy of their road maintenance policy, a policy that only applied to roads inside the subdivision plat. Sable Lane was not inside that plat. It sat entirely on my private land. I read the letter twice, folded it neatly, and filed it away under the label Darlene, Round 1. The second letter came a week later and was far more aggressive. The HOA board had voted to classify Sable Lane as a shared community thoroughfare. I was being assessed a special $4,200 fee for my portion of the upcoming repaving project. Failure to pay would result in a lien on my property. That was the moment I pulled my father's original deed from the filing cabinet. The legal description was crystal clear. Sable Lane lay completely within Parcel 7, Block 14 of the Sable Family Trust. It was never part of the Ridgewood Plat. It was never public. It was never shared. It was private land, built with private money, and owned exclusively by me. I drafted a firm, polite response explaining the boundaries, attaching the deed, and reminding the HOA they had zero jurisdiction over my property. I mailed it certified with return receipt requested. 3 days later, Darlene Voss herself showed up on my porch wearing a peach cardigan and a smile that looked borrowed from a campaign poster. She explained that the road had been used by the community for 15 years and that, in her opinion, made it common property. She suggested I should be grateful they were willing to share the cost instead of billing me the full amount. I calmly reminded her that I was a civil engineer who understood easement law, that no easement had ever been recorded and the road remained mine. She tilted her head, smiled even wider, and left with the words still hanging in the air that she would simply have to see about that. The scent of her floral perfume lingered on the porch for hours afterward, sharp and entitled. I added the conversation to my growing file and made a single note: she is not going to stop. I had no idea how right I was. Darlene Voss had just declared war on a man who knew every inch of property law in Texas and who had spent a lifetime building the very roads she now tried to steal. She thought her little kingdom gave her power. She had no idea that the private land she had chosen to invade was owned by someone who could and would fight back with patience, paperwork, and perfect legal precision. But Darlene wasn't finished. In fact, she was only getting started.
I filed his visit report in the folder anyway. Every piece of paper mattered now. That weekend, the parking began in earnest. Ridgewood residents started leaving their cars along both sides of Sable Lane, not near the subdivision entrance, not for quick errands, but directly in front of my house, bumper to bumper, day and night. 8 cars one evening became 10 the next, then 12. They blocked my driveway approach, made it difficult for Colton's school bus to stop, and turned my private road into overflow parking for their clubhouse renovation. I asked one of the drivers, a man casually washing his Tahoe on my asphalt, why he was there. He shrugged and mentioned an email from the HOA encouraging residents to use all available community parking during the construction. Community parking on my land. I photographed every vehicle, recorded every license plate, noted every date and time, and added 17 new pages to the folder. The stack now required its own shelf in my office. The air that week carried the faint scent of sun-baked asphalt, mixed with cheap cologne from the car owners who treated my road like their personal lot. Darlene's next move was more calculated. She filed an application with the county clerk's office to have Sable Lane reclassified as a public thoroughfare under a prescriptive easement claim. Her argument was straightforward. The road had been used openly and continuously by Ridgewood residents for more than 15 years without challenge, which she believed created a permanent legal right for the community. In Texas, prescriptive easement is the road version of squatters' rights. 10 years of open, hostile use can sometimes lock in access. But there was one fatal flaw in her theory. The original use had never been hostile. My father had given explicit permission in writing, documented in his old leather-bound pocket journal from 2003. That single entry proved the access was temporary and permissive. No hostility meant no easement, ever. I pulled the journal from the fireproof safe, photographed every relevant page, and took it straight to my attorney, Walter Hines, a 30-year veteran of East Texas land use law. Walter reviewed the journal, the deed, the county records, and the denied reclassification filing. He leaned back in his chair and told me she didn't have a leg to stand on, but he advised letting her generate as much paper as possible. Every document she created would only bury her deeper when the time came. I filed a formal counter-response with the county, attaching the deed, the updated survey, the road classification records, my father's journal, and a sworn affidavit from a longtime neighbor who remembered the original handshake agreement. 3 weeks later, the county denied Darlene's request outright. The denial letter was clear and final. Sable Lane was and had always been a private road. No evidence supported any easement claim. According to 3 separate neighbors who called me that same evening, Darlene spent the entire HOA board meeting screaming that the county was corrupt, that I was obstructing community progress, and that if the system would not handle this, she would handle it herself. I wrote that phrase down and underlined it twice in the folder. The pine trees along the lane creaked softly in the evening wind as I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea. The road my father built stretched out smooth and quiet under the fading light. I stared at the fresh lines of parked cars that still refused to leave and thought about what "Handle It" herself might actually look like. I didn't have to wonder for long. The diesel engines arrived on a Wednesday night in October, and by the time the sun rose again, everything had changed forever. The diesel engines arrived on a Wednesday night in October, and by the time the sun rose again, everything had changed forever. I was up late helping Colton glue foam planets on a coat hanger for a school science project when the low rumble first reached the front windows. It was well past midnight. 4 sets of headlights crawled down Sable Lane like slow predators. Behind them rolled 2 asphalt pavers, a heavy roller truck, and a dump truck loaded with fresh hot mix. I stood in the doorway in the cool October air and watched in stunned silence as a full road crew hired by the Ridgewood Estates HOA began resurfacing my private road without a single word of permission, without a county permit, and without the slightest legal right to touch 1 inch of my land. They worked through the night with ruthless efficiency. The pavers laid down a thick, steaming layer of new asphalt straight over my father's original chip seal surface. The roller followed, pressing it smooth and black under the glare of work lights. They installed 4 bright yellow speed bumps at priceless intervals. They painted crisp double yellow center lines and crisp white edge lines. At both ends of the lane, they drilled deep holes, poured concrete, and bolted heavy Ridgewood Estates private community signs into the fresh posts. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the pine tops, the crew packed up and vanished, leaving behind $88,412 worth of unauthorized work gleaming in the early light. I later obtained the exact figure through a public records request to the HOA management company. Darlene Voss had authorized the entire expenditure from the Community Reserve Fund using nothing more than her own signature. No full board vote, no permits pulled. The paving company, Tar Line Solutions, had simply shown up and done the job she ordered. The smell of fresh asphalt and diesel lingered in the air for days, a constant reminder that the woman who ran the neighborhood like a personal fiefdom had just committed open trespass on a massive scale. I called my attorney, Walter Hines, before the sun was fully up. He answered on the second ring, listened without interruption for 90 seconds, then said the words that told me the tide had just turned in my favor. She had just made my year. The next 6 weeks looked quiet on the surface. Darlene probably drove past her new asphalt every morning with a satisfied little smile, convinced she had settled the matter once and for all. She had no idea what was happening behind closed doors. First, I hired licensed surveyor Dale Crutchfield, a man who had been staking property lines in East Texas before GPS existed. Dale walked the entire length of Sable Lane with a transit level in steel tape. He confirmed every inch of the new pavement sat squarely inside Parcel 7. Then he drove 62 bright steel boundary pins into the ground at 10-foot intervals along both sides of the road and filed an updated survey with the county. Those pins were now official legal monuments. In Texas, tampering with one is a Class A misdemeanor.
Second, Walter filed a formal complaint with the county building department about the unpermitted paving. A no-nonsense inspector named Rita Fuentes arrived in a white county truck wearing steel-toed boots. She examined the fresh asphalt, checked the permit database, and confirmed that Tar Line Solutions had performed over $88,000 of road construction with 0 paperwork. She issued an immediate stop work order and opened a code violation case against the HOA. Third, I installed 4 high-definition security cameras, 2 at each end of the lane, angled to capture license plates, faces, and exact timestamps. They fed into a secure cloud system and recorded 24 hours a day. Every vehicle that entered Sable Lane from that moment forward was logged and dated. Fourth, Walter obtained a temporary restraining order prohibiting the HOA from any further modification, construction, or signage on Sable Lane. The judge granted it within 48 hours. The order was served to Darlene at her front door on a Sunday afternoon. According to the process server, she read the first paragraph, turned the color of a ripe tomato, and slammed the door without a word. Fifth, and most important, Walter filed a petition for declaratory judgment confirming my exclusive ownership of Sable Lane and my absolute right to control access. He also asked the court for explicit authorization to enforce no trespassing rules, including the immediate removal of any unauthorized vehicles. The judge reviewed the deed, the new survey, the county records, the denied easement application, and the HOA's own unpermitted paving as evidence of willful trespass. He signed the order granting me full enforcement authority. That single piece of paper meant I could now legally remove any car parked on my road without giving individual notice. I called Big Earl's Towing out of Longview. Earl had been a friend of my father's for 30 years. A 6'4" former lineman who ran a fleet of flatbed trucks and never blinked at difficult jobs. I told him I would need 12 trucks on standby for a Saturday morning. He laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away from my ear, then promised 14 would be ready. I ordered 6 heavy private road no trespassing signs, steel-backed, reflective grade, bolted to 8-foot steel posts. They arrived on a Thursday and went straight into the barn for storage. Darlene did not take the restraining order quietly. Within a week, she called an emergency community rights meeting at the Ridgewood Clubhouse. I was not invited, but a retired electrician neighbor named Buck recorded the entire thing on his phone and quietly sent me the audio file. In it, Darlene told 112 homeowners that I was trying to steal their road, that I was a hostile outsider extorting the community, and that if they did not fight back, I would gate the lane and trap them inside their own neighborhood. Fear rippled through the room. People who had used Sable Lane for 15 years genuinely believed it belonged to them. She launched a petition. Within 3 days, 91 signatures demanded the county override my ownership and declare the road public. Darlene hand-delivered it to the commissioner's office with a local television reporter in tow. The story ran that evening under the headline, "HOA Community Fights to Keep Access Road After Homeowner Threatens Closure." The county reviewed the petition against the now voluminous file that included my deed, the survey, the denied easement, the building code violation, and the fresh court order. They issued a public statement the next day. Sable Lane was privately owned, no public interest claim could override recorded title, and the petition had no legal basis. Darlene spun the rejection as corruption and told the neighborhood the county was in my pocket. She started a GoFundMe to hire an attorney to challenge the court order and raised $11,000 in 4 days. The first lawyer she hired reviewed the file, told her she had no case, and was promptly fired. The second lawyer told her the same thing. During this time, parking on Sable Lane grew worse, not better. Cars lined both sides from my driveway all the way to the highway entrance. Some mornings, Colton could barely get the school bus to stop because the road was so congested. I documented every plate, every timestamp, every blocked driveway approach. The folder was now 3 inches thick and had its own dedicated shelf. One night, someone slashed all 4 tires on my work truck. Camera footage showed a teenager doing the cutting, but behind him, standing at the end of the driveway in an SUV with the headlights off, was Darlene. She never got out, she simply watched. I saved the footage in 2 separate cloud accounts and mailed a copy to Walter Hines with a formal request that he send it to the sheriff's office. The deputy who reviewed it could not make a positive identification from footwear alone, but he opened an active case file for criminal mischief and documented the clear pattern of ongoing harassment. The air that evening smelled of pine sap and damp asphalt. I could feel the weight of every illegal act Darlene had committed stacking higher and higher, each one more reckless than the last. Darlene still believed raw volume and sheer numbers could override recorded deeds and court orders. She pulled her most desperate move yet on a Wednesday morning. She contacted code enforcement and filed a formal complaint claiming my property had become a blighted nuisance.
The specific allegation stated that the construction materials stored on my land, the steel posts, survey stakes, and waiting no trespassing signs, constituted an illegal dumping site and violated county blight ordinances. A different code enforcement officer, not the sharp-eyed Rita Fuentes, arrived to inspect. He walked the entire property, noted the signs stored neatly inside the barn, observed the boundary pins professionally installed along the road, and found zero evidence of blight. His report concluded the complaint was without merit and explicitly noted that it appeared retaliatory in nature. That single sentence, once entered into the official county file, became another heavy brick in the wall I had been quietly constructing for months. 2 days later, I pulled out of my driveway and immediately sensed something wrong with the road surface about 200 feet from the house. A thin, deliberate line of roofing nails stretched across the fresh asphalt, the flat-headed kind designed to puncture tires at any speed. I stopped the truck, stepped out into the cool morning air, and spent 20 minutes picking them up by hand. I counted 47 nails in total. The camera footage from the night before showed everything. At 3:14 a.m., a figure in a dark hoodie walked slowly down the center of Sable Lane carrying a plastic bucket. They kept their face carefully turned away from the lenses, but they had not been careful with their shoes. The high-definition frame captured a clear view of white Skechers with a distinct pink stripe, the exact pair Darlene wore to every HOA meeting. I saved the footage in 2 separate cloud accounts and forwarded a copy to Walter Hines with a formal request that he send it to the sheriff's office. The deputy who reviewed it could not make a positive identification from footwear alone, but he opened an active case file for criminal mischief and documented the clear pattern of ongoing harassment. The air that evening smelled of pine sap and damp asphalt. I could feel the weight of every illegal act Darlene had committed stacking higher and higher, each one more reckless than the last.
On Thursday afternoon, Darlene sent her final, most blatant mistake. She fired off an email to the entire Ridgewood Estates mailing list, all 112 households, openly encouraging residents to park on Sable Lane over the coming weekend as a show of community solidarity. The message urged them to fill every available inch of the road, bumper to bumper. She wrote that there was no way I could do anything about it, that I could not possibly tow 100 cars, and that this was their road and it was time they stood together. The email was reckless, arrogant, and, most importantly, preserved forever in digital records that Walter would later subpoena. I read the forwarded screenshot Buck sent me and felt the final piece of the trap click into place. Darlene had just publicly instructed her neighbors to commit mass trespass on private property she had been warned, in writing and by court order, not to touch. She had handed me the perfect justification for the enforcement action I was now legally authorized to take. I called Big Earl that same Thursday night. I confirmed the exact time, Saturday morning at 6 o'clock sharp. Earl's voice carried the same deep laugh I remembered from my father's stories. He promised the full fleet of 14 flatbed trucks would be staged and ready by 5:30. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing the entire folder one last time. Every letter, every violation sticker, every photograph, every court document, every time-stamped camera still. The stack was now 3 inches thick and organized with the precision of a civil engineer who had spent 15 years designing infrastructure that had to withstand hurricanes and lawsuits alike. Colton was away at a friend's house for the weekend, which was exactly how I wanted it. I sat alone at the kitchen table with a fresh pot of coffee, the house quiet except for the crickets singing outside in the October darkness. The new asphalt on Sable Lane still carried a faint chemical sweetness that drifted through the screen door. I thought about my father, about the half-mile of road he had built with his own hands and his own money, and about the woman who had decided that her little laminated badge gave her the right to steal it. I felt no rage, only a calm, focused readiness, the same feeling I had when I used to stand on a county job site and watch the first load of concrete pour into forms I had designed myself. By Friday night, the signs were in the barn, the cameras were running, the court order was printed and clipped to my board, and every license plate from the past 4 months was logged in neat columns. The pine trees along the lane swayed gently in the evening wind. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice and fell silent again. I closed the folder, turned off the kitchen light, and stood on the porch for a long moment, looking down the dark stretch of road that had once belonged only to my family. Saturday morning arrived cool and gray, with low fog clinging to the tops of the pines. Dew glistened on the fresh asphalt like a thin sheet of glass. By 6:15, the first cars had already begun to appear. By 7, the count had reached 48. By 7:30, it hit 52. Darlene's email had worked exactly as she intended. Residents poured in, parking bumper to bumper from my driveway all the way to the county highway entrance. Some had even placed small American flags on their dashboards as if they were staging a noble protest instead of deliberately trespassing on land they had been ordered to stay off. The trap was no longer almost set. It was wide open, perfectly baited, and ready to spring. At exactly 7:45, the first diesel engine growled to life on the county highway and turned onto Sable Lane. Then came the second, the third, the fourth. 14 flatbed tow trucks from Big Earl's Towing rolled down the road in a slow, rumbling line, amber lights flashing against the gray October fog. Diesel engines growled low and steady, while steel chains clanked against the beds. The first truck stopped beside a silver Honda Accord parked directly in front of my driveway. Earl's crew moved with calm professionalism, sliding the flatbed under the front axle, hooking the winch, and lifting the car in under 4 minutes. They moved to the next vehicle without pause, then the next. The entire operation ran like a well-engineered machine. Doors began flying open all across Ridgewood Estates. Residents spilled out in bathrobes and slippers, coffee mugs still in hand, staring at the convoy as if an alien fleet had landed on their street. Some ran toward their cars in panic. Others stood frozen on their lawns, phones raised to record the impossible. A woman in a pink bathrobe shouted that this could not be happening. Deputy Tom Huxley from the County Sheriff's Department stood calmly beside me at the entrance to my driveway, holding the court order high enough for anyone approaching to see. He explained in a steady, patient voice that Sable Lane was private property, that the vehicles were being removed under a county court order, and that anyone who interfered would face arrest for obstruction. The towing continued without interruption. Then, Darlene Voss arrived. She came barreling down the sidewalk in yoga pants and a bright Ridgewood Estates windbreaker, her face flushed deep red. She pushed past 2 neighbors, planted herself directly in front of the third tow truck, and began screaming at the top of her lungs. She claimed the entire action was illegal, that the road belonged to the community, and that she would sue everyone involved. Deputy Tom Huxley walked over without raising his voice and repeated the facts of the court order. He warned her that continued interference would lead to her immediate arrest. Darlene stared at him, then at me, then at the tow truck now loading her own white Escalade onto the flatbed. The sound that escaped her was raw and furious, like a pressure valve finally bursting. Walter Hins stepped forward at that exact moment. He had been standing quietly beside the deputy the entire time, dressed in a sport coat and carrying his briefcase as though this were an ordinary business meeting. He handed Darlene the thick stack of papers and informed her that she had just been served with a civil lawsuit. The suit charged the HOA and Darlene personally with property damage, trespass, unauthorized construction, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Darlene took the documents with shaking hands, her mouth opening and closing without producing another sound. By then, a local news van from KX7 had pulled up at the highway entrance. A reporter and cameraman hurried down the lane and began interviewing residents on the spot. One older woman, a retired teacher named Phyllis, looked straight into the camera and explained that none of them knew the road was private, that they had simply used it for 15 years because it was there and no one had ever stopped them. That single interview clip would air on the evening news and spread across every local social media group within hours. The towing operation never slowed. By 8:30, the first wave of 52 vehicles had been cleared from the stretch in front of my house. The road, once choked bumper to bumper, stood empty for years. The Ridgewood Estates signs that Darlene had bolted into my land the night of the secret paving were removed by the same crew I had hired that morning. In their place rose the 6 heavy steel-backed no trespassing signs I had stored in the barn.
Each one gleamed in the late morning light, reflective letters bold and unmistakable. Private road, no trespassing. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. The immediate fallout arrived even faster than the tow trucks. Darlene Solutions, the paving company Darlene had hired without permits, received a $14,000 fine from the county building department. Their contractor's license was suspended for 6 months. The owner told the local paper he had been assured by the HOA that everything was authorized and that he would never work with another human interest association again. Inside Ridgewood Estates, an emergency board meeting was called for the following Tuesday night. By unanimous vote of 8-0, Darlene Voss was removed as president. The new board president, a retired accountant named Mort Devo, called me personally the next morning. He expressed deep embarrassment on behalf of the entire community, stated they were angry at how Darlene had acted, and said they were ready to make things right. The civil lawsuit moved forward with relentless speed. Walter filed a motion for summary judgment supported by a banker's box of evidence: the deed, the survey, the county denial of the easement, the unpermitted paving records, the camera footage of the nails and the tire slashing, the email Darlene had sent instructing mass parking, and the court's own declaratory judgment. Darlene's third attorney reviewed the file and strongly advised her to settle. She resisted for 2 full weeks, still convinced she could fight the facts with volume and outrage. During those 2 weeks, the towed vehicles sat at Big Earl's lot. Each owner eventually paid the standard towing and storage fees to retrieve them. Most were no longer angry at me. The news coverage, the court documents now public record, and Mort Devo's open letter to the neighborhood had made it painfully clear who would cause the entire disaster.
I used the quiet period to prepare the final steps that would close the chapter once and for all. The folder that had lived on its own shelf for months was now complete. Every illegal act Darlene had committed had been turned into ironclad evidence. The road my father built stood clean and quiet under the new no trespassing signs. The pine trees swayed gently in the December wind, and for the first time in over a year, Sable Lane felt like it truly belonged to my family again. But Darlene still had one last refusal left in her. She was not ready to sign the settlement papers. She believed she could still win if she simply held out a little longer. She had no idea that the final collapse was already written and that the papers she would soon be forced to sign would end her little kingdom forever. By 10:30 that Saturday morning, the last of the 52 vehicles had been loaded and hauled away. Sable Lane stood completely empty for the first time in more than 15 years. The fresh asphalt gleamed under the lifting fog. The new no trespassing signs stood tall and reflective at both ends, and the only sound left was the quiet rustle of pine needles in the December breeze. Big Earl's convoy rumbled back toward the highway, chains clanking softly as they disappeared around the bend. Deputy Huxley shook my hand, congratulated me on a clean and lawful operation, and drove off. Walter Hines closed his briefcase with a satisfied click and told me the real work was just beginning. The fallout inside Ridgewood Estates arrived like a quiet earthquake. The emergency board vote removing Darlene as president had already been unanimous, but the full weight of public embarrassment settled over the neighborhood in the days that followed. Mort Devo, the new board president, sent a formal letter to every homeowner explaining exactly what had happened, attaching the court order and the county's denial of any easement. He expressed the community's regret and promised they would never repeat Darlene's mistakes. The civil lawsuit moved with the speed of inevitability. Walter's motion for summary judgment landed like a hammer. The evidence file was now so complete that Darlene's third attorney advised immediate settlement. She fought the recommendation for 2 long weeks, still convinced that louder outrage could somehow rewrite the deed. Then the judge scheduled a hearing. Faced with the prospect of a public courtroom defeat and the very real possibility of even larger damages, she finally broke. The settlement was signed quietly in Walter's office the following Tuesday. Darlene paid every cent out of her own personal assets. The HOA's insurance carrier refused coverage entirely because she had acted without board approval and outside the scope of her authority. The total came to $130,000. full reimbursement for the unauthorized $88,000 paving job, plus $42,000 in additional damages for trespass, property modification, legal fees, and the documented harassment. She wrote the check in silence. Walter slid the signed release across the table, and just like that, the war was over. I used the settlement money with purpose. First, I established the Sable Family Road Scholarship, a $2,500 annual award for graduating seniors at Colton's High School who plan to study civil engineering, construction management, or public infrastructure. The first recipient was a quiet girl named Annika, whose father drove a concrete truck for a living. She cried when she received the check at the award ceremony. I sat in the back row and felt my father's presence stronger than I had since the day he passed. Second, I sat down with the new HOA board and negotiated a formal, recorded access easement. Ridgewood residents could continue using Sable Lane, but now everything was legal, documented, and mutual. The HOA agreed to contribute to future maintenance costs on a fair share basis. I retained full ownership and the right to approve or deny any future modifications, signage, or construction. The agreement included ironclad clauses preventing exactly the kind of midnight paving raid Darlene had attempted. The document was filed with the county clerk the week before Christmas. The road my father built was finally protected by law instead of just goodwill. Colton helped me install the final boundary marker on a cold Saturday afternoon in late December. The steel pin went into the ground with a clean, solid thud. He looked up at me with the same grin my father used to wear after finishing a tough stretch of highway and said the moment felt complete. The pine trees swayed overhead. Sable Lane stretched out smooth and quiet under a gray winter sky, no longer contested, no longer claimed by anyone but its rightful owner. Darlene Wass disappeared from public view inside the neighborhood. She sold her house 6 months later and moved to a retirement community 2 counties away. Last anyone heard, she had taken a part-time job at a local craft store, where her authority extended no further than organizing yarn displays. The neighbors who had once parked bumper to bumper on my road began stopping by the house to apologize in person. Several brought homemade pies or casseroles, the same kind they had brought when I first moved back. They admitted they had simply followed Darlene's lead without ever asking the real questions. I accepted every apology with the same calm I had kept through the entire ordeal. The folder that had lived on its own shelf for so long was finally closed and moved to the bottom drawer. Every page inside it had done exactly what it was meant to do. I stood at the end of the driveway one clear January morning and looked down the half-mile of asphalt that caused so much trouble. The new signs gleamed in the sunlight. The boundary pins caught the light like small silver sentinels. The road my father built in 1987 with his own hands and his own money was once again just a private lane leading home. No more orange stickers, no more boots on bicycles, no more midnight paving crews. Only peace. If you've ever dealt with an overreaching HOA, a Karen who thought your property was hers, or a neighbor who confused loud confidence with legal authority, you already know how this story feels. The lesson is simple and unbreakable. Patience, documentation, and the law will always outlast arrogance. When someone tries to take what is yours, the strongest response is never rage. It is a quiet, meticulous paper trail that eventually becomes an iron wall. Sable Lane is quiet again. The pine trees still creak in the wind. And somewhere in the distance, another family is probably dealing with their own version of Darlene Wass right now. If that family is you, keep every receipt, photograph everything, and stay calm. The tow trucks are waiting for the right moment. The road belongs to its owner once more, and that is exactly how it was always meant to be.